It happened so fast the palace staff barely understood what they'd witnessed Catherine stepping in. Calm but unmovable, stopping Queen Camilla inches from what she wanted most. Not jewels. Not titles. Something far more dangerous, Diana's private correspondence. For years, rumors swirled that these letters could rewrite everything: alliances, betrayals, even succession loyalties. And now, with one quiet refusal, Catherine turned a secret archive into a battlefield. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The urgency didn't feel manufactured. It felt like the kind of alarm that spreads through a palace in seconds, unplanned, uncontrolled, and instantly threatening. Whispers snapped into motion. Phones went silent. Footsteps changed pace. 5 minutes ago wasn't a headline. It was a timestamp on a crisis that no one had prepared to explain. Because this wasn't a public event you could spin with a statement and a smile. This was a sudden collision inside the walls, where protocol exists for everything except raw panic. One moment, the archive was just another locked promise of the past. The next, it was the most volatile object in the room, and Catherine was standing in the only place that mattered between Camilla and Diana's words. Catherine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her authority wasn't loud, it was absolute. Measured tone, steady posture. No hesitation, like someone who had already decided that whatever happened next, she would rather be accused of defiance than allow a single page to be touched. That's what rattled people most. Catherine wasn't acting like a woman caught in a family disagreement. She was acting like a guardian of something sacred, something that didn't belong to the present reign, and certainly didn't belong in Camilla's hands. The air changed as soon as she said no, because no is not a word often used that plainly inside royal corridors. It's usually softened, disguised, delayed. Catherine gave it clean, direct, final. Camilla's intent was framed as access, but the tension revealed it as entitlement, an assumption that she could enter any sealed corner of royal history, simply because she now wore the crown. Yet this wasn't just history. This was Diana, and Diana's private correspondence wasn't a collection of polite notes to be handled by committees. It was the last unfiltered place where her truth could still exist without editing, without interpretation, without royal varnish. That's why the staff panicked. Not because of drama, but because of risk. Insiders understood instantly that this was bigger than personal tension. If those letters contained even one detail that could shift public perception permanently, the monarchy wouldn't be fighting a narrative for a week, it would be bleeding trust for a generation. And Catherine seemed to know exactly how dangerous that possibility was. She didn't argue about feelings. She didn't appeal to kindness. She pointed, instead, to consequences. There were pages, she implied, that cannot be unsealed without fallout, pages that don't merely sting, but burn. That single hint hit like a warning bell, because it suggested the archive wasn't just sentimental, it was controlled for a reason. Not everyone was meant to read it. Not everyone was safe to let near it. And as Catherine held her ground, the unspoken fear in the room sharpened into a single terrifying question. Why was Camilla pushing for it now? Because timing is never innocent in a palace. Urgency is usually a signal of pressure, external, internal, or both. Someone had told Camilla the letters exist in a form she could reach, and someone had told her this was the moment to try. That means the attempt wasn't impulsive. It was a move. And if it was a move, it had a purpose. To get ahead of something, to control something, to prevent something from surfacing first. Catherine's refusal didn't just block Camilla. It exposed the fact that Camilla believed she was racing time. Staff who had remained neutral felt their loyalties wobble, because in that instant Catherine looked like the only person trying to keep the monarchy from detonating its own past. And when Camilla realized Catherine wouldn't step aside, the conflict stopped being polite. It became personal in the most dangerous way: Diana's legacy versus the present Queen's authority. The future Princess of Wales versus the woman who had once been the shadow in Diana's marriage. Catherine's calm made it worse, not better, because it carried an unspoken message. She wasn't afraid of the consequences, and she wasn't alone. If Catherine was willing to defy Camilla in the open, then she must have reason to believe she had protection: Williams, the institutions, perhaps even the public's. And that's when the silence turned sharp, because everyone could sense the next step would not be a quiet retreat. It would be escalation. But before anyone could even decide whether this was protection or rebellion, a darker question surfaced: what exactly is inside Diana's correspondence that makes Camilla willing to risk everything? Diana's voice didn't die with her. It lingered in ink, in margins, in words she never intended to become headlines. That's what made the correspondence so dangerous. These weren't polite notes. They were emotional records, raw, detailed, and allegedly specific about what she endured and who she believed was truly behind it. The palace could manage rumors. It couldn't manage Diana speaking for herself. And Camilla knew that better than anyone. The most unsettling thing about letters is how calm they look while they destroy you. A page doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It simply exists, patient, permanent, waiting for the right eyes to land on the right sentence. That's why the correspondence was framed as unfiltered Diana, because it wasn't polished for audiences or shaped for interviews. It was pain written when no one was supposed to be watching, suspicion written when she felt trapped, private clarity written when the public version of her life was being edited by other people. If Diana wrote what she truly believed, then every line becomes a fingerprint, not a rumor you can dismiss, not a headline you can outlast, but a record that refuses to bend. And written evidence hits harder than anything else, because it doesn't rely on performance. Interviews can be dismissed as emotional. Memoirs can be attacked as opportunistic. Hearsay can be spun until it loses its teeth. But a letter? A letter is intimate. It reads like a confession, like a warning, like a map of what she saw when the palace thought she was isolated and powerless. That's why the idea of these pages makes the institution tense in a way it doesn't tense for gossip. Because letters don't just tell a story, they freeze a moment in time and dare you to deny it. They can carry dates, names, details that are too specific to ignore. And if even a fraction of the whispers are true, some of Diana's correspondence allegedly does exactly that: naming names, marking moments, leaving behind warnings she feared would be brushed aside until it was too late. That's where Catherine's role becomes far more than protective. She isn't treating the letters like sentimental artifacts to be preserved behind glass. She's treating them like legacy and detonator at the same time, an inheritance that deserves reverence, and a truth that could rupture the monarchy if mishandled. Catherine understands something many people overlook. Diana's story isn't just history, it's the emotional foundation of William's entire life. Every accusation, every heartbreak, every betrayal, those aren't abstract scandals to him. They're personal scars. So when Catherine stands between Camilla and that correspondence, it isn't only about protocol. It's about protecting William from being ambushed by his mother's rawest words, being handled by the one woman the world will always link to Diana's suffering. It's about stopping a private truth from becoming a political tool. And Camilla's urgency access now only sharpens the danger. Urgency is rarely innocent. It suggests pressure from somewhere, political, legal, personal, or all three at once. If Camilla suddenly needs those letters, it implies she believes something is about to happen that makes them relevant again. A looming leak, a legal complication, a book or documentary circling closer, a claim about Diana that can't be answered with vague statements. The timing makes it feel less like curiosity and more like a defensive move: control the source before the source controls you. And that's why Catherine's refusal lands so hard, Because it breaks a silent pattern, the palace usually reacts by containing the narrative. Catherine reacts by guarding the truth. Then the story tilts into something even darker. With one chilling possibility, there may be two sets of letters. One known, one hidden. One that the palace has already accounted for, and another that has been kept out of reach, waiting for the moment it becomes impossible to suppress. That possibility turns the correspondence into a living threat, because it means even if Camilla gained access to what she thinks is the archive, she might still be blind to the most explosive pages. It means someone Diana herself, or someone Diana trusted, planned for the day the palace would try to control her voice. And if that plan exists, then Catherine isn't just protecting a memory, she's protecting a mechanism. Because here's the cliffhanger buried inside all this fear, the letters don't just criticize. They allegedly predict something. Not in a mystical sense, more like Diana leaving patterns, warnings, and conclusions about what would happen if certain people were allowed to steer the story unchecked. A prediction doesn't have to be supernatural to be terrifying. It just has to be accurate. And if Diana's words point toward a future scandal, a future fracture, a future betrayal, then whoever reads those pages first controls how the monarchy prepares or how it panics. And just as the palace began to remember how dangerous Diana's truth could be, Catherine did something unexpected. She revealed she wasn't guarding paper, she was guarding a chain of custody. The biggest shock wasn't that the letters existed, it was who held the keys. Catherine. Not a courtier, not a private secretary, not a dusty archive committee. Catherine. That alone changed the power map overnight, because when Catherine controls access to Diana's correspondence, she controls the narrative of the monarchy's most haunting chapter. And Camilla's attempt to breach that control wasn't just disrespect, it was a declaration of war. In the palace, power rarely announces itself. It slips quietly into new hands while everyone pretends nothing has changed. But this shift was impossible to ignore, because it reframed Catherine overnight from a steady presence beside the future king to the protector of a legacy that could fracture the institution if mishandled. The correspondence wasn't being treated like sentimental memorabilia, it was being treated like a state-level risk. The kind of private truth that can trigger public consequences the moment it's read by the wrong person, at the wrong time, for the wrong reason. And the fact that Catherine, not the machinery of the palace, was now the gatekeeper sent an unmistakable message. William's household wasn't waiting for permission anymore. It was building its own lines of defense. That trust didn't come out of thin air. Catherine had something the palace couldn't manufacture: moral authority in the eyes of the public, and quiet backing from William that made her stance feel less like personal preference and more like the future of the monarchy choosing discipline over desperation. Staff noticed it immediately. People who usually floated with the safest current began aligning themselves with Catherine, because they sensed where the future was pointing. In royal circles, loyalty is often a prediction, not a principle. And Catherine looked like the safest prediction of all, stable, respected, and unshakably tied to the monarchy's next era. Camilla misread the situation, and that miscalculation was fatal. She treated access like entitlement, as if wearing the crown automatically granted her ownership over Diana's memory. Catherine treated it as violation, not just of Diana, but of William, of the boys, of a boundary that should have been obvious but was being tested anyway. The tension wasn't merely emotional, it was procedural, because Catherine didn't just stand in front of the letters, she stood behind protocol. There were rules, she implied. Sealed envelopes, witness requirements, restrictions that existed for a reason. The kind of safeguards that suggest someone once anticipated a moment like this. Someone trying to reach Diana's words, not to understand them, but to manage them. And that's exactly why Camilla didn't ask like someone seeking understanding. She moved like someone seeking control. That distinction changed everything. Because if this were about closure, she would have waited. If it were about respect, she would have requested permission. Instead, the urgency suggested fear of what Diana wrote, fear of who might read it first, fear of a truth that cannot be negotiated once exposed. And Catherine saw it instantly. This wasn't curiosity. It was damage control. The attempt wasn't simply to read the letters. It was to control the narrative before someone else could, to prevent leaks, to manage optics, to protect a legacy that still feels fragile beneath its polished surface. That's when the deeper chill set in. Because controlling Diana's words doesn't just protect Camilla, it reshapes public memory itself. If Camilla gained access first, she could influence what the palace says next, what it denies, what it clarifies, what it frames as misunderstanding. And Catherine understood how quickly private access becomes public rewriting. The emotional tension tightened into something sharper. Catherine saw invasion, Camilla saw necessity. And somewhere in that clash was a haunting twist. Camilla may have suspected Diana left specific instructions about her. Not vague feelings. Not general pain. Something directed. Something explicit, which would explain why Camilla's urgency felt less like entitlement and more like panic. Because urgency usually means pressure. External pressure. Lawyers, advisors, an impending documentary or book, a rumor about the letters moving toward daylight. Catherine hinted without naming names that Camilla wasn't acting alone, that someone was advising this move, someone calculating risk, someone pushing her toward the vault as if they believed time was running out, and that raised the most dangerous question of all. If someone inside the palace tipped Camilla off, then someone inside the palace was willing to gamble with Diana's legacy to protect the present. Catherine didn't just want to block access. She wanted to know who opened the door to this attempt in the first place. But if Catherine held the keys, it raised a more unsettling possibility. Someone else had tried to unlock the vault before, and Diana may have written about it. And just when the palace thought this was a private family clash, a new threat emerged, because if those letters surface, they don't just hurt Camilla, they shake Charles. For Charles, Diana's letters aren't history. They're an open nerve. And the moment Catherine stopped Camilla, the king didn't just see conflict, he saw risk. Because Diana's correspondence doesn't merely reveal emotion, it allegedly documents patterns, decisions, and betrayals that could stain the crown itself. The question isn't whether Charles feels guilty. The question is whether he feels exposed. And that fear changes how the palace moves. Charles was suddenly trapped between two worlds that cannot peacefully coexist, the wife at his side and the heir's household rising in front of him. Every move looked like a side. Every silence looked like permission. And the monarchy's stability, already fragile in the modern era, felt like it could shatter under the weight of Diana speaking again, not through interviews or memory, but through her own private words. Because a new generation doesn't react to Diana the way the old one did. To the young, she isn't an old scandal. She's a symbol of suffering, of betrayal, of a woman swallowed by an institution that always claimed it was protecting itself. If those letters surfaced, public fury wouldn't return as nostalgia. It would return as judgment. And Charles understood that instinctively, even if he didn't say it aloud. He could feel the room around him tightening, not because people wanted truth, but because truth doesn't negotiate with crowns. The emotional conflict inside the palace became almost unbearable in its simplicity. Charles wanted silence, Catherine wanted boundaries, and Camilla wanted control. Silence is the monarchy's oldest defense, because it allows time to soften what honesty would sharpen. Catherine's boundary, her refusal, was a direct threat to that defense, because it suggested the future of the monarchy would no longer treat silence as sacred. And Camilla's push for access wasn't framed as curiosity anymore. It looked like strategy, like someone trying to prevent a truth from landing in the wrong hands. That's why Charles's unease turned into something darker. Because if Camilla believed those letters could harm her, then Charles had to confront the possibility that the letters could also harm him, his decisions, his image, his reign, his claim to moral authority. Then came the twist that made the situation feel less like a family crisis and more like a cover-up reaching its expiration date. Charles may have known about the correspondence all along and assumed it was secured. Not just locked away, but contained, managed by the palace, controlled by procedure, buried beneath layers of protocol so thick no one could pull it free without permission. But Catherine, standing there as gatekeeper, proved something terrifying. The archive wasn't fully under the king's control anymore. It had moved into the hands of the future, and if Charles had relied on it staying quiet, that reliance suddenly looked like a miscalculation that could cost him everything. Pressure breeds orders, and fear breeds containment. The whispers began to shape into something more deliberate, an instruction, private and urgent, to contain the archive quietly before it became public. Not a public announcement, not a legal filing, not an official palace position. Quiet pressure. Private persuasion. The kind of containment operation the monarchy is best at, because it can pretend it's about dignity while it's actually about survival. But Catherine's stance made that containment harder, because she didn't just resist Camilla, she resisted the old reflex to smooth things over for the sake of appearances. And that resistance raised the most explosive possibility of all. Catherine suggested William had read parts already and he's changed. Not publicly, not dramatically, but internally, as if something in those words had reached into his deepest loyalty and rearranged it. If William had seen his mother's unfiltered truth, then the power balance wasn't just shifting, it was breaking. Some secrets are painful, others are strategic. Catherine's refusal carried a chilling implication. Diana may have left explicit conditions who can read the letters, when and why. That transforms the correspondence from personal diary to controlled legacy. And if Diana wrote that Camilla should never access them, then Camilla's urgency becomes something else entirely, a race against a rule she cannot overturn. Catherine wasn't blocking paper. She was enforcing Diana's boundaries from beyond the grave. And the idea of boundaries, real ones, written ones, terrified the palace more than emotion ever could. Because boundaries mean consequences. They mean someone anticipated betrayal and designed a defense against it. That's where the instruction page concept enters like a blade sliding out of its sheath. Sealed terms, witness rules, time locks. Not just rules written for politeness, but for protection. Catherine would honour it because it isn't merely Diana's will, it's moral duty. It's protection of William, and it's protection of the monarchy's future from being manipulated by panic. Camilla's reaction, in that light, becomes even more revealing. Her panic doesn't read like curiosity, it reads like fear of being named. And the twist lurking beneath the surface is chilling. The instruction might specify what happens if someone tries to access prematurely, an automatic consequence that the palace cannot control once triggered. A fail-safe. A release mechanism. A contingency that sends the contents to a trusted party if tampering occurs, ensuring Diana's words cannot be buried again once someone crosses the line. And here's the cliffhanger the palace can't swallow without choking. Someone may have already violated those instructions before tonight. A prior attempt. A previous breach. A missing seal. A whisper of pages touched when they shouldn't have been. If that happened, then tonight wasn't the first attack on the archive, it was simply the first time Catherine stopped it in real time. And just as the palace began to grasp that Diana still had power, Catherine made a move that shocked everyone. She warned that one more attempt to access the letters would force a public reckoning. This wasn't just Catherine versus Camilla, it became household versus household, future versus present, legacy versus survival. The palace didn't erupt loudly, it fractured silently. Staff chose who to answer first. Courtiers stopped returning calls. Advisors whispered in corners like they were preparing for a coup without weapons. Because if Catherine held the archive and Camilla wanted it, then the monarchy wasn't debating letters, it was debating who gets to define Diana forever. Lines were drawn in the only way a palace knows how, quietly, decisively, and with consequences no one admits out loud. Loyalty began shifting toward Catherine, not because she shouted the loudest, but because she looked like future-proof stability. The kind of steady authority that protects the institution from itself. People who normally lived for neutrality suddenly had to choose which phone call to return first, which meeting to attend, which instruction to treat as urgent. And that is how a dynasty truly divides, not with a public explosion, but with private decisions made in seconds, repeated in whispers, until the fracture becomes real. Camilla's camp mobilized with a cold efficiency that felt almost practiced. There was no dramatic confrontation, just quiet pressure wrapped in protocol arguments about entitlement, about hierarchy, about what a queen has the right to access. The framing was subtle but sharp. Catherine was being portrayed as obstructive, emotional, disrespectful to the present reign. And Catherine, in contrast, stood firm without theatrics, treating the letters like a boundary the monarchy had no right to cross for convenience. It became legacy versus survival in its rawest form, because Camilla's side wanted control of the narrative to avoid damage, while Catherine's side wanted control of the truth to prevent manipulation. Both claimed they were protecting the crown. Only one of them was willing to risk being hated for it. The emotional collateral hit hardest where it always does inside William's household. William's fury wasn't the kind that explodes. It was the kind that hardens. Protective, personal, and quietly lethal to anyone who thought they could pressure Catherine into surrendering. Catherine, meanwhile, stayed steady, but you could feel the wound beneath her composure. The disrespect wasn't just from Camilla's attempt, it was from the implication that Catherine's boundaries could be negotiated if enough people leaned on her. That kind of pressure doesn't just challenge a royal, it tests whether the future Princess of Wales can be bent. Catherine refused to bend, and that refusal made her both stronger and more vulnerable at the same time. Then the twist arrived like a poisoned whisper. Someone close to Camilla leaked that Catherine was hiding something. Not protecting. Hiding. That single word ignited paranoia because it reframed Catherine's stance from moral defense to suspicious secrecy. It was a strategic smear designed to turn staff uncertainty into doubt, doubt into fear, fear into pressure. Suddenly, people weren't just asking what Camilla wanted. They were asking what Catherine was keeping from everyone else. And that question was dangerous because it threatened to trap Catherine in the palace's favourite weapon, forced transparency under hostile conditions. If Catherine explained too much, she revealed the archive's power. If she explained too little, the whisper campaign grew teeth. Behind the scenes, the ultimatum formed not shouted, not announced, but delivered with the quiet firmness of people who believe they can still control outcomes. It wasn't phrased as a threat. It was phrased as a way forward, a compromise, a managed access plan that would let Camilla save face while Catherine maintained dignity. But Catherine heard what it really was, an attempt to soften her boundary into something pliable. And that was the moment the palace realized they weren't dealing with the old system anymore. Catherine's stance hardened. No private compromise. No managed access. No version of this where Diana's words become a tool for anyone's reputation management. Because Catherine understood the risk calculus better than most. Public sympathy was her shield. Yes, but it could also become a target if the narrative turned. The more powerful she looked, the more desperate the opposition could become. And there were looming external triggers that made the tension feel like a ticking clock, a book, a documentary, a legal dispute, or a leak countdown that could be days away from detonating. Internal fear spread like smoke, because if Diana's words emerged, they wouldn't just scorch Camilla. They could implicate others, too: old advisors, old decisions, old compromises that had been buried for decades. In other words, this wasn't simply about who reads the letters. It was about who survives what the letters might reveal. That's when Catherine hinted at the twist that made everyone's blood run cold. The letters were already secured with a failsafe beyond palace control. Not a threat shouted across a room, but a quiet reality stated with deadly calm if anyone tried to force access. The archive wouldn't just be contained. It would move, it would surface, it would reach a trusted party, triggering consequences that protocol could not stop. And in that moment, the palace wanted this buried more than ever, and Catherine's refusal became more than protection. It became a warning shot. Because the moment Catherine stopped Camilla, she signaled something terrifying. The monarchy's future won't be built on silence anymore. But when you break a long-standing rule of secrecy, you invite retaliation. Now the question isn't whether Camilla will try again. It's how far she'll go, and what Catherine is prepared to unleash if forced. But the most chilling part wasn't the conflict, it was the possibility that Diana's correspondence was never meant to stay private. And Catherine might be the one chosen to reveal it. And if you think this story ends with a locked drawer, think again, because the real question is what Diana wrote that Catherine is willing to protect at any cost, and who will try to steal it next. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.